It's a big day for Penn State football and for the Big Ten. The long-awaited contract for the Big Ten media rights has been announced. Our senior reporter and big picture guy, the dude who gets you all the insight about the big moving of things, senior editor Nate Bauer, is coming on to discuss how that affects Penn State, the Big Ten, and answer my out of left field questions, which I'm absolutely going to have. And then we are going to answer your out of left field questions about Penn State football on the BWI mailbag. So strap in. We got an hour of conversation coming up on the BWI Daily. There he is. There's Nate Bauer, joining me on the BWI Daily Edition. As I said yesterday on the show, if you're listening on the podcast, or if you saw the full version of the show over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, there's always like some factual inaccuracy with my introductions, but there's none today. Straight up, that's what we're talking about. And Nate, give us the goods on what's going on with Penn State football and a huge windfall of cash coming their way, I assume.
Yeah, I was going to say that it scares me that intro was true because, like, don't we have any like straight up the middle questions, any non left field questions? Because I tend to struggle. I tend to struggle with the left field ones. So, yeah, no, I mean, look, there's always the law of things that are going to happen, right? And so it's been this 8-month chase of what's going to happen with the Big Ten's media rights moving forward. Obviously, it was a much discussed thing. The $1 billion number got thrown out, I think, in February, and really it's been something that we've been talking about ever since then. And so today it finally happened, and it is I think on the granular level, a pretty massive shakeup for the way that we, certainly in the media and people that cover the Big Ten, but also fans, consume Big Ten content. It's right. It's just program your remote now and or buy a streaming box or device of some sort, because you know these are the ways that you're going to have to access things moving forward. It's not just going to be on ESPN.
Yeah, so that is one thing that I think it was Greg and I talked about when we were talking about how this is all going to be distributed without ESPN and their 4 dedicated channels of different sports content. But I want to start first. You said the $1 billion number was thrown out. Mm-hmm. Have you looked at it? Is that where they ended up getting? Is that going to be the number? And then break it down for each individual school from there, please.
Yeah. You're catching me a little bit off guard here because I know that it
first out of left field question. Off the bat.
Look, the numbers that I saw were a little bit, I don't know if inconclusive is the right word, but the reporting was that it ranged between $80 and $100 million per school annually, right? And so this is a 7-year deal, of which the 2 new schools, USC and UCLA, come in after a year of this existence in the first place, right? So all of these different elements are going to be different. I mean, obviously, the Big Ten, as it currently stands, those 14 are going to have a bigger cut on the front end of this than I would expect those other 2 to have. But overall, and generally speaking, everybody's going to make a lot more money. That's the bottom line. Is Greg reported this? You know, you're going from an annual windfall of $53 million, I believe is the number, to 80 plus 85, 90 million dollars. And so, you might not be quite doubling that figure, but it's a big number. It's a huge number. And certainly at a time when you're talking about a lot of college athletic programs and departments that are realizing and starting to understand that the number equation is changing, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna get fewer donations from fans to the athletic department than you have in recent years, because you're actually going to start pushing them away from that model. You need to be able to support your athletic programs through NIL now, And so this back end of things where there's TV and media rights and that contract, those figures are going to be what stands in place of in the future. And obviously I'm projecting a little bit here, but
right
in the future, as opposed to donating to the Nittany Lion Club to support those things, it's going to be, hey, you need to support Success with Honor or Penn State's other collectives to make sure that this ship is floating smoothly.
Right. So additional streams of income have always been a part of the college football model. That's not going anywhere. It's just different allocation of those resources. In the long run, we might even get away from things completely like that. Who knows where the deal goes? And this only goes, what you say, 7 years. So that's not necessarily a long time if you consider. I think the ACC is locked in until 2036. So these are the advantages and disadvantages you can find yourself in with these corporate negotiations like this. When we talk about college football being like, high school, that's long gone. All those conversations about the yesteryear. Now we're into, these are big numbers. These are going to be the engine that drives all of this stuff. So from a Penn State perspective, have you gotten a sense in talking to Pat Kraft and talking to the sources you have with inside Penn State, how they have kind of mapped out how they want to use that money? Do you have an idea of the broad picture there?
Well, certainly in the initial conversation that I had with Pat Kraft, it was about urgent needs of Penn State's athletic department. Now, look, like this isn't going to kick in until 2023 when those numbers start to be realized. So there's a gap of time in between now and then, of which Penn State athletics continues to have some pretty serious and real needs from certainly a facilities standpoint. The men's and women's soccer programs, they need new digs, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. It is not good, the situation that they have. Swimming and diving and the natatorium. There's a bunch of issues that need to be addressed for Penn State athletics before this even goes into effect. But no, there is no question that Penn State isn't looking at this money as something of, like a bonus. It's not. Right. It's not on top. Oh, like we got to dream up new ways to spend this.
Yeah, right.
No. Here's the laundry list.
But also, I imagine part of the conversation that I've had previously with other shows and other co-hosts is, it's not like these operations are outside of the inflation that all of us are experiencing, not necessarily the acute stuff over the last year and a half, but also just the long-term view of how much things cost, from travel to equipment to things like that. Like, the costs do add up. So when you see these numbers going up, it's outpacing, I'd say, what the rest of us are matching in that sort of march towards the future. But at the same time, it's not like they're still operating with the budget they were 10 years ago. And that money, as you just said, now they're looking for ways to spend this. This is all money that is going to be allocated for the base expenditures still. And those are going up. And then how do you advance things forward? Is that a fair way to look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so to a certain extent. You have to understand that everybody else is getting the same money, and so there's no way to look at this as wash your hands, it's all done, you don't have to try anymore because the media rights contract means that all your problems are solved. They're not. They're not. You have to look at how everyone else is using the money, what their needs are, what your needs are, and just keep pace. I mean, I hate to put it in the context of an arms race, but it's just programs that are positioned well from a facilities standpoint already are at an advantage now because they can use this money in other ways. There are other avenues that they're going to be able to spend this money to the benefit and potentially to the separation of where they stand against other programs in the conference. Penn State is not in that situation. Penn State is in a very different situation where there are lagging needs, things that have existed for years and years and years, that either decisions have to be made to cut your losses and call it a day, or, hey, it's time to play catch up and, start planning out, mapping out. I mean, look, that's what the facilities master plan was, right? This is the roadmap. This is how we are going to start to address things. But that facilities roadmap and the facilities master plan is 8 years old. Right? Like it's, and so the things that were applicable then are,
and how much of it was even accomplished? Like how much is still on the docket? That was kind of the whole point of it in the long run, was these are the things we want to do. We can only do them if we get donations and if all the things that we have dreamed for come to reality. And the list of things they wanted to do is still longer than the list of things they've accomplished, not to diminish what the previous administration and Sandy Barbour did at Penn State, but that's just the reality of where you are as what you laid out. So one thing I do want to push back on is it does create a differentiating factor for teams outside the Big Ten. So I've looked at this as like, you're on the boat, be happy you're on the boat. And this is where I wonder, that thought of, what does this do for Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana when they're competing, maybe not against the Big Ten, and that's always going to be kind of a big block of a big problem for them, but also what's their level of quality going to be versus Kentucky, Vanderbilt, other teams from the Big 12.
Yeah. I just think, the SEC is the wrong conference, right? Because that's the other one that's going to eventually, whether it's right now or whenever their next contract comes up, is going to be probably on the same level. But certainly I do think, and I saw this already from Dennis Dodd at CBS, that this has not necessarily ended the possibility of expansion for the Big Ten.
Okay.
Certainly those Pac-12 schools that were initially reviewed are probably going to come back around as being on the table. I think everything's on the table. Everything is possible right now.
What would be it felt like the dam burst when you move USC, which is the one of the last, iconic big ticket programs outside of Notre Dame. So what is the holdup here? What is happening that is causing the Big Ten to not feed? Like this, you've got they're down for the count. Take them out if you view them that way, which you do because you just took the heart of the Pac-12.
Yeah, but you have to weigh it against what is the value of the additions that you're bringing in. And so if they're not, if the schools that are left out there, right? So Cal, Berkeley, Stanford, Washington, Oregon, if those programs don't give you the similar boost that you felt Southern Cal and UCLA did, like what's the share after bringing those schools in? If you add 4 schools, and we're talking about between $80 and $100 million is the payout for the current 16 members of the Big Ten. Well, those 4 schools better be able to increase the annual value of your media rights deal by $400 million a year. Is that realistic? Is that possible?
So I got right there. Is that possible? Or because then it seems like you are at a gridlock. You are at a deadlock of, you're not trying for world dominance. You're trying for maximizing the potency of what you have, which then you should examine some of the schools that are in the conference already. Then we're down an entirely different road.
Right.
And I do want to get on to the mailbag. We could talk for this particular topic for hours.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to there, but any last thoughts?
No, I would just say it is exactly that. It is a rabbit hole. It is something that people who get paid a lot more than us are currently examining and figuring out, hey, what's the road forward? What is the path forward? Because it might not. And this is the way that this works is, all right, this deal is done. So guess what that means? It's time to start thinking about the next deal 7 years from now. It's time to start imagining and thinking of what is this landscape going to look like? And, you know, how do you make the most amount of money that you possibly can? Because that's the end game. I mean, it's business.
Yeah. It just feels like when you have, you know, the landslide happened, but you're waiting for the earthquake that splits everything open. And you're expecting that, you know, this first onslaught is going to be the time that it all changes. And it's just maybe it's more of a slow erosion than it is going to be anything else. And I'm going to leave my rock metaphors because, again, I'm not a scientist. I just play one on YouTube. So let's move on. And before we get to the mailbag, a couple things we want to do here on the BWI Daily Edition. The first is tell you about how you can get to all these games for Penn State football. Because that's another thing that Greg Pickle talked about on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, how this media deal affects Penn State fans and the games and the whiteout, all that stuff. So, have you been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets? Jim at TixmanJim.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchased is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your home opener tickets to Ohio U. The Ohio State, not a whiteout, but it's the stripe out. Minnesota, homecoming whiteout. Get those tickets at www.tixmanjim.com or email Jim at tixmanjim@gmail.com. Call 302-521-8380. And I'll give you those again, just because that's a lot of information, like a fire hose of W's and dots. www.tixmanjim.com. If you're here on YouTube, you see tixmanjim.com on the screen, or tixmanjim@gmail.com. So, Nate?
Yeah.
One other thing I want to get to before we get into the mailbag, and I promise it's the last one other thing, is that we have an announcement. We talked about this yesterday on the show, but I want to get it here on the YouTubes early in the show, not at the end. We are moving to prime time on August 29th, 7 p.m. BWI Daily Edition. We're going to 7 p.m. to start the season. So that means August 29th, the week of the Purdue game, you can check out our airing of the BWI Daily at 7, and that'll be the schedule going forward. We have a lot of loyal viewers that come on the show and that watch with us live at 7, like Stephen Light and M-Shive2, who always donate to the channel. Super appreciate them for their contributions. So I want to make sure everyone knows we're going to be talking about this over the next week and a half so that everyone's on the same page when we all can go together to 7 p.m. You're not wondering where everything went. Okay, let's get to the mailbag. The BWI mailbag, primarily powered by the BWI Lions Den message forum. So if you want to get your questions on the air, we take your questions. If you sign up for $1 at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you get on the Lions Den message forum Wednesday night when I post the bat signal, when I post the thread, you ask your question, we get it on air. So it's just like that. And let's get that out of the way for a second. And let's see, DG2296 says, T-Frank, does Penn State bring 3 and drop 8 or bring 5 and drop 6 more consistently to stop the Purdue passing attack? And how much will we learn about this Penn State secondary with either being the case? Nate, I think Manny Diaz is more likely to bring 7 than drop 8. He would bring 11, I think, before he dropped 8 in coverage.
Yeah, I think what Terry Smith said on Wednesday was that having cornerbacks that you can rely on and trust allows the rest of the defense. And I by the rest of the defense, I think he generally means 9 other defenders to focus on the run and pass blitz, right? That's, so you've got 2 corners. You feel really good about them. I mean, I don't think that you're looking at prevent defense from this guy very much.
Yeah. And DG is talking about something you and I discussed when I watched what Wisconsin did against this Purdue offense, where they dropped 8. They had a whole defender, and they were kind of spying the quarterback from the secondary, which I thought was a pretty good formula. Part of it was they could still get home with 3. Like, their guys were eating up that Purdue offensive line. If Penn State could do that, then sure, every defensive coordinator would. If you can get pressure with 3 and drop 8, yeah, you would do that all the time. but they only did that selectively. I should also say that was only something they did every once in a while. So it's a good question, and I think one that will illuminate what we know about the secondary, because it is going to be more aggressive. I do think they're going to bring, a lot of blitzes from the interior, Sutherland, slot corner, maybe some corner blitzes, give some variety and things like that. So I think we're going to see a good bit of pressure. And then it's going to be on O'Connell to make the right read, and it's going to be on the blitz to get there. The worst thing you can do is send players and have them just disappear into the offensive line. Beaverman 72. Nate, you called this one.
Oh, boy.
Last year, when discussing Kalen King, James Franklin referred to King as being more prepared and more impressive than during his tenure of any freshman. King followed that up with a few highlight plays in the blue-white game and last year, and saw a decent amount of playing time his freshman year. Is it fair to say the hype around Kalen King has died down? What are reasonable expectations for King this year? He actually went somewhere with it that I didn't expect. I thought he was going to say, is there something wrong with Kalen King? But yeah, has the hype died down? What are reasonable expectations for him in year two? That's a great question.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that look, there's only so much new in this ecosystem, right?
Right.
We're always looking for what's new. So yes, on the front end of careers, particularly for guys who enroll in January, you want to talk about them. And they do. There's this balance. James Franklin talked about it last year, about the balance between how guys stand out versus what your expectations are. And so quite naturally, on the front end of careers, you expect a transitionary period. You expect there to be an acclimation into what you're doing, some stumbles, some problems, some issues that occur along the way, because that's what life is. It's, it's a process. And so when players come in and immediately have some success, that catches your eye, that catches your attention. And so I think that certainly Zane Durant fit that bill this past year. Kalen King obviously met that criteria last year.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're not doing well once they get into their career. Kalen King's in a better spot today than he was a year ago. There's no doubt in my mind. Terry Smith, we talked to him yesterday. He said that Kalen King is doing fantastic. Again, Johnny Dixon has become a story this spring, or this preseason, I should say.
But it's an either or thing, right? So what we do is, because Johnny Dixon is X, that means Kalen King is Y, and there's not room for both. We live in a what is that? Limited resources, zero sum. We live in a zero sum sort of mindset that both can't be true. One has to take from the other.
Yeah, no, but that's not real. What's real is that Penn State, look, he said it yesterday. Terry Smith said it. I'm going to quote him here. He said that he felt like he had 5 defensive backs in the room, or cornerbacks in the room, who will play in the NFL, and he included Marquise Wilson in that equation. And so that's it right there. Is you've got 5 outstanding corners, including Daquan Hardy, in that equation, who all project to be NFL draft picks.
Yep.
Can they all be starters, and can they all get 80% of the reps? No, obviously not. There are decisions to be made. And right now, what I think is important to note is that while Kalen King has not had necessarily the conversation around him publicly that certainly Johnny Dixon did in the first couple of days of camp, and even Joey Porter, as now being projected by Todd McShay, I believe yesterday, as the number 23 best prospect in the upcoming class of NFL prospects. Yeah, those guys are getting the attention, but Kalen King's going to start, and Kalen King's going to play a ton of football. And by default, even if you want to ignore what Terry Smith said about how well Kalen King is doing, by default, that simply means that he's that much better than the 3 other corners that they have in the room who also have NFL potential. Right. So that's the trajectory there. Is Kalen King is doing just fine. And he is poised to have a very good season this year for Penn State.
I guess the way I've talked about it here on the show, and this should be a fair thing for me to say, is that I was a little disappointed given what we were told about Kalen King initially and what we've seen since. Now, that is not to say that he has been a disappointment. When you say the most prepared freshman that we've seen and sets a certain level of expectation, certainly from a physical standpoint, you see it immediately. His electric movement skills, his ability to stay in sticky coverage with players. I see all that. I get exactly what James Franklin meant as far as a corner, those skills translating early. And if you had a mature mental approach out of the gate, yeah. But then when it came to the story evolved, and James Franklin talked about it last year about how maybe it was hot out of the gate, kind of slowed down, and maybe it was more of a reasonable expectation for a freshman after a while, gets into the game late in the year and contributes. I guess that is maybe a coloring on my part of what I expected, what I see of his talent, and then kind of the mental freshman mistakes that he made. And that's, I guess, part of maybe where this conversation has gone awry, and that is probably my fault. For the glory.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, at least on this show, I guess that's the every time we talk about this and I say something about Kalen King and you're like, yeah, and he's also good. And then there's this like, oh yeah, well, that maybe that's my expectation shading this particular conversation when we discuss it here on the show. For the Glory asks, on average, how many points per game has Manny Diaz allowed in his first year as a defensive coordinator at previous positions? Curious how many points the offense will need to score on average to take the pressure off the defense. Now, Manny Diaz had a pretty long career, but I did look this up, and I want to make sure I have it here in front of me. Diaz was on Mark Richt's staff in Miami in 2016. Hurricanes were 5th nationally in tackles for loss, which is a big thing he talks about, and 12th in scoring. And they went up from 77th the year before. So that's with that particular, and that I think shows you when you talk about the year before, what they were and the talent they had, 77th, and then he brings in what he did, and they become 12th in the nation. Now, that was a good team to take over, I think, for Diaz. Some of the pieces fit pretty well. Now, going back to 2015, and that's as far as I want to go back because we're talking about different football pre-2015. Like, it's a different game.
Yep.
In Mississippi State, they averaged 23.2 points per game. So somewhere in there, somewhere from 12th, which I believe was in the 20s, in the low 20s, to 23.2. So I think that's a fair. This defense can keep teams into the low 20s if they've got the pressure and the skill to get to the quarterback and the secondary to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I don't look, and we know this. Points per game can be a deceiving metric, particularly in the middle of the season, just because you don't have that breadth of games. Certainly by the end of the season, it gives you a little bit of a clearer picture because having shutouts necessarily is defrayed a little bit by the fact that you have so many games. To me, the question is, can someone hang 42 on these guys? Can someone hang 50 on Penn State's defense this year? I don't think so. I don't think so.
No,
because that's a combination of two things. It's a combination of, can anybody score 50 in the Big Ten, period? And
there's one school I see that with.
Yeah, there's one school, and so that's the metric, right? Is Penn State positioned to hold the teams in the Big Ten that score 25 points a game to 25 points? Yeah, I think so. And are they positioned to hold the team that actually scores 40 points to 40 or under? And that's Ohio State. And yeah, I think that's true too. So look, they're going to have a good year this year. Is it going to be the numbers that Brent Pry put up last year? I'm not sure, because I'm just kind of committed to this idea that there will be this balance of more aggressiveness having a backside to it, right? And a downside to it of some bigger plays that are going to be scored against this Penn State team. But you do that because you believe that your offense is positioned to have success.
Yeah. When you're playing that game of take the ball away, maybe you give up some plays. how much, Nate, have we talked about, has James Franklin talked about, and the analytics and everything say the more possessions you get, the higher chance you have to win. So even if you're kicking a field goal and you get a free field goal out of a turnover, it's not ideal. I'm not saying you should be happy about that, but you got 3 essentially free points because you stole a possession, literally forcefully took it away from the opposition. You know, as much as you've seen him in practice, you've been around him more. How much has he emphasized getting the ball when it's on the ground, forcing the ball out, and getting turnovers and not dropping interceptions?
Yep. 100%. And I mean, I've already written about it today that they understand deeply just how important those plays are to dictating success and failure, right? You're here to win the game. And so if you want to win the game, the differentiating factor is so often turnovers committed or turnovers gained. And for Penn State, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, that is mission critical, is creating turnovers. And they believe that they have a secondary that is very, very capable of doing that.
Nate, I believe here on the BWI Daily Edition that we create great stuff. I believe that this show is awesome. I believe that we do this better than anyone else that covers Penn State football, and I believe that we do this better than most people that cover college football. But there's one thing that is outside of my control, Nate, and you know what that is?
The almighty algorithm.
So, if you're watching the video here, if you're watching the video and you're enjoying the show, please give the video a like. Because if you do that and you share with your friends, that helps us create even better content and have us be even more successful. If you're a Penn State football fan and you want this to be successful, be one of the top YouTube shows on the planet, that's your contribution. We're not asking for any money, by the way, unless you want to donate it, and we'll be thankful for that. But a like is free. Anyway, there's my stump speech. Nice. FR Buff says, if you had to venture a guess now on which true freshman will receive a green light and which will not be redshirted, which true freshman is going to get a green light. We discussed this a little bit. Has this conversation updated since the last time we talked about it, where Zane Durant and Dennis Sutton, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen are the 4 for sure guys, and we believe strongly that Abdul Carter is another one. Is there anyone else that you're looking at that can get that green light this year?
Yeah, I think Drew Shelton, we've talked about him a little bit as being in that, because that's a combination of need at tackle, but also his ability and the way that he's come in. I mean, he's a guy who just showed very early, on his arrival at Penn State, forget preseason camp, just as soon as he got to Penn State, it was very clear that he was positioning himself to make an impact as soon as this season. And so I think that he would probably be in that mix. And then outside of that, I think KJ Winston might make his way into that conversation. It's so crowded there that it's kind of tough to see.
Christian Driver is another one that, from a skills perspective coming in, you would think has an opportunity. But if you've got 5, what did Terry Smith, 5 NFL corners?
Yeah.
Hard to do that there.
Yep.
What about Caden Saunders? Because very early on, I was very high on him. Watching him in the spring, he had some growing to do. But that's never a door that's closed if you do the growing. And I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally and how you approach things. Is that a guy who's the door is open for? Because I know a lot of fans are very excited about Caden Saunders.
Yeah, I think the door's open. I think it would be disingenuous to behave as though the top 5 isn't the top 5, right? There is a clear delineation between Mitchell Tinsley, Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Malik Mega, Harrison Wallace versus everybody else, right? Yeah. And so is Caden Saunders a part of that? And is he somebody who we've touched on in our notes this preseason? Yeah, he is, which is new. And something that I think bodes well for him and the possibility of becoming a factor, but I don't think it's quite there, right? Like, I don't think it's quite there to where I would say green light. I would put him in that yellow category, of which there's quite a few. There's quite a few in that yellow category who, if the circumstances arise and there's a need, it becomes an easier decision, a very easy decision, because they're so physically prepared for this. They're so ready for it. You know, so it'll be interesting to see as the season goes on.
They have to forcibly get their way on the field through the sheer power of their abilities, as opposed to, we need you, buddy. Like, we need you and you're good enough. Now it's about, as you corner and receiver, 5 deep at either position of guys that we think have a realistic shot to be good this year and we're to be good for the rest of their career. That's a great place to be in. Now, if you could only get there everywhere else, and put a pin in that, we'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
Mike Pitts asks, I'm already excited for the first game of the season. By the way, he sent this during the spring. Have you watched any film on Purdue? And if so, what do you think the key matchups are? So Mike, I appreciate him reminding me of this on Twitter this morning when I put out the call. Yes, I have now watched the film, and I'll stick to the offense here for this, because if you want to go check out the full conversation Nate and I had, you can check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Wherever you get your podcasts, we did a podcast on both the offense and the defense over the last week. It was yesterday we did it for the offense, defense the week before. So we broke down Purdue and how they work and all those things. Check those out. But I will say, to me, the biggest thing is I don't think they have replenished their pass rush enough. Now, they've got a couple guys. Branson Dean, by the way, is an awesome name. He's a good pass rusher on the interior as a defensive tackle. Scotty Humpich, also an awesome name for a different reason, is a good pass rusher from Murray State, who I think can provide some pass rush. Is that enough to get Sean Clifford off the spot and to ruin the Penn State passing attack? I just don't think it's enough. I don't think that. Especially if the Penn State offensive line is better this year. If, Landon Tangwall and the right guard, whoever that is, those two guys that are battling, if they're good enough and they're as good as we have been saying that they are, this should be something that Penn State can handle with Fashanu and Wallace at the tackles, who, by the way, the other week, Phil Trautwein called the best tackles he's coached in his career. So all that evidence points to they should be able to handle the pass rush, keep Clifford clean, and he can operate. We've seen what he can do from a clean pocket. And if you haven't, go watch what he did against Auburn. That was a very good performance. Probably, I'd say, the best of his career. Okay. Miller 22. Penn State is 6 deep at defensive tackle. Did you want to add anything, by the way, to the last question?
Okay. No, not at all. You did a great job.
PSU is 6 deep at defensive tackle and defensive end. How many of those guys and linebackers will be rotated regularly by Manny Diaz? Well, at linebacker, James Franklin already said something yesterday that you and I have been talking about throughout the preseason about how many Mike linebackers that'll play, right?
Yeah, well, he said yes for sure that both Kobe King and Tyler Elston being the first, will play. He didn't really go much further than that. I don't think that we haven't had a whole lot of conversation about Jamari Button and kind of that situation behind Curtis Jacobs. And we haven't had a whole lot of conversation about John Sutherland and what exists behind him, which is Dom DeLuca. Yeah. So, in terms of what my expectation, are you going to take Curtis Jacobs off the field much? I don't see that.
Until Abdul Carter, if he is as good as it seems they're salivating to get him on the field, until he's ready to play, I don't know that you're taking Curtis Jacobs off the field.
Yeah, and just in general, I mean, there's always that element of fan expectations of how much depth is going to get to play versus reality, which is not that much. I mean, it's just there's always that break of, hey, here's the reality is the guys that you have starting are starting for a reason because they're the best player. And so, you want to have opportunities to develop depth, and certainly in the non-con games that would be considered pushovers, you have to take advantage of those opportunities. You have to get those guys in the game and active. You certainly want them to be active on special teams in areas that you can. But is Penn State going to play, if you're talking 6 and 6 between the defensive ends and defensive tackle, and first of all, obviously they don't have 6 defensive ends, but 6 defensive tackles plus 4 or 5 defensive ends. No, they're not going to play 11 defensive linemen every game. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So there will be the cream rises to the top, and those guys are going to get the lion's share of the work there.
Yeah. What's the difference between they'll play and they'll play meaningful reps? So you may see some of the defensive tackles play in a game, but are they playing significantly? Are they playing 2 or 3 snaps? Or are they playing 10 to 20 or 30? What's the breakdown there too? Because that's another part of the conversation. Of technically, you can play a guy for 2 or 3 plays, and that's playing. But is it playing?
It's more than 2 or 3, but fewer than, what are we looking at for average snaps a game at this point? 65 to 75 defensive snaps in a game, maybe. That might even be on the high end, depending on the opponent. Look, like Jordan Vandenberg to me is kind of the prime example, right, of a guy who gives you confidence that if you have an injury in front of him, he can step in and you don't suffer that much of a drop off. Yeah. But is Jordan Vandenberg going to play half the game? Is it going to be an even split of reps? No, it's not. Right. And so it's kind of keeping that context in mind of, yes, you want to keep guys fresh. There will be rotating, right? There's going to be guys that are going to get in for a series. Maybe in the first half, right? You give that first team a break or a breather in the fourth series of the game, the fourth offensive possession. But is that like a, hey, 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 1 out? No, I don't. Right. I don't foresee that happening.
Yeah, there'll be more rotation at positions where rotation is natural to begin with, like defensive tackle, or in certain situations, which defensive end is on the field to have and this is another part that I think is important to remember, is like sub packaging. How many guys have a role on the team as well? And then how many times that role comes up will dictate how many times they get on the field. So that is another part of the conversation here. But one thing James Franklin did say that I was alluding to is that both middle linebackers are going to play. So if Tyler Elsdon right now, he said, and you've reported this, is leading that competition, but Kobe will play. And however much he plays I'm interested. It sounds to me more like a timeshare. Like it's going to be Tyler Elsdon. That'll be his job, but both will be a meaningful part of the game plan.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the other factor to consider here that is important is what Manny Diaz likes to do, right? Which is, and he has said it previously, that he does like to rotate players. Like he does like to get guys involved in the game from the earlier parts of the game. So, I mean, but again, it's this balance of, okay, if it's kind of hard to break down possessions, but if you get guys in for a possession at the end of the first quarter, and then maybe once more to close out the half or somewhere in the middle of the second quarter, that's still, you're looking at like a 3-1 kind of breakdown. It's just, you're going to play your starters more.
Yeah, for sure. So here's another question about Manny Diaz. And this is one I'm going to tell you right off the bat, PSU 1987. I don't think there's any way to really know this, but in your observation, do you think Manny Diaz is connected, assimilated, invested in Penn State football, State College, and James Franklin? Any signs he likes it here, or is he just filling a void in his career? I don't know any way to know that, Nate. So just quickly on this one, because
I think it's kind of
I want to say, like, always contributes great questions, but I don't know how to answer this one.
Yeah, I think that what he's going for is probably, has he bought a house? Right. Yeah. Are his kids here? What are the personal situations for Manny Diaz? And I don't know the answer to that. And I wouldn't.
It's a little inappropriate.
I wouldn't. That's not. I don't know. Does Manny Diaz seem happy to be at Penn State? Yes, I could say that without question. Yeah. I think that in my interactions, the things that I've observed of him, he seems happy, but I do think, and this is worth saying, any notion of long-term commitments of coordinators is just gone. It's just out the window, right? Like Brent Pry waited for the right opportunity. And I'm not even saying that Manny Diaz, if he got if he got an offer to coach Youngstown State next year, that he would bail on Penn State to go take that opportunity. I'm not saying that. But if there are good Power 5 jobs that are open for Mike Yurcich, Manny Diaz, I think people just need to get used to the idea that they're probably going to take them, right? I mean, that's what most aspirations are for these guys, is to have an opportunity to be a head coach. And in Manny's case in particular, I don't think that many people looking at it through an objective lens would say that he got a very fair shake at Miami, right? Yeah. Like he will be back in the head coaching profession. It's just a matter of finding the right fit and the timing on it.
Yep. And that's all TBD, because that depends on how good he is and how good other teams are or are not.
Yep.
So Cy Kim is back, and I pre-read this question. He is doing another great job of doing promotion for me here on the show, reminding me to talk about previous shows. Is there a backup offensive tackle who is mainly practicing there, or who would be the first player to play if one of the offensive tackles starters got hurt? Is it Tangwall sliding over? Thanks for the super interview of AJ Locke, who was on the show on Tuesday. AJ Locke, an awesome story. If you didn't check out the BWI Daily Edition on Tuesday, he is a walk-on commit. He has cerebral palsy, and he is the coolest dude I've talked to this week. No offense, Nate. Super, he's just nobody's primary thought in life is to inspire other people and make you achieve your best. And that was what he told me on the daily, is that his goal is to inspire others to reach their potential. And somebody who has a selfless, positive worldview like that, I
love it.
Better person than I am. Better person than I am, for sure. Got a question from Ryan Eicher on Twitter. Oh, we should probably answer the first part of that. It's Landon Tangwall, and apparently, as you are saying, maybe Shelton?
Yeah. I'm not sure, honestly. I think they have to. You don't want either one of those guys to go down. That's just kind of the reality. Is you don't want that to happen, because and we've talked about this previously. Bryce Effner is recovering from injury, kept him out all spring. We've seen him at practice, and so is he available? Yes. I just hesitate to put him in the, hey, everything's hunky-dory if somebody gets hurt, that Bryce Effner can fill in there. So, some things to be determined there at tackle, but my expectation would be that Landon Tangwall would be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think he has to be. And then we've mentioned a couple of other players, but a true freshman, your starting left guard, or some of the depth players that you maybe don't feel great about. This is Sean Clifford of 2021. These tackles can't get hurt. For the best possible outcome, these tackles can't get hurt. Ryan Eicher asks, is PSU looking to take any more defensive tackles in the class of 2021 or 2023, I'm assuming? And I would say yes. Ryan is currently on vacation at the beach. I haven't talked to him in a little bit. Will Norman committed to Florida. He was the last kind of offensive tackle that was very publicly a top player that Penn State was interested in, as far as my recollection so far. It's not great, Ryan. The situation, kind of like an offensive tackle, it's not great right now, and I don't think there's a clear situation. But Ryan, when he comes back from the beach, I'm going to shame him for enjoying his life and then get it back to the info mine to go get us some more information, because I'm as curious as you are, Ryan. I want to know, and I don't want to wait. So Stephen Light asks, what's the over-under on how many touchdowns Penn State needs to be leading in order to get Christian Veilleux some reps? He's thinking 3 touchdowns. Nate, this is something James Franklin talked about earlier during camp, of an admission of some of the things they learned last year about getting guys reps in games.
Yeah, that's a great question. 3 seems low to me, depending on time and place in the game. But if, look, 3 might be right. Like 21, if they're up 21 points, let's say it's 24-3 in the middle of the second quarter, could I see Christian Veilleux getting a series? Yeah, I could see that. I could see
in the non-conference, not against Auburn, like in the non-conference.
I think that's probably fair. Depending on what happens, right, with Northwestern. I don't really know what to expect from Northwestern this year. But if let's say Northwestern is, not a juggernaut this season in that type of a situation, I could see it as well. But it's just, it's kind of the same old story, right? Is are you willing to take your top quarterback off the field and give yourself maybe even more of a cushion? Because let's be honest, if it's 24-3 in the second quarter and you can possibly get yourself to 31-3, you want to take that. You want to get that opportunity. You want to give yourself that cushion to where you can sit the starters and give the starters off for the fourth quarter and get those guys in and have a comfortable win. But I do think that picking and choosing spots, particularly at quarterback, is going to be an important element of the early part of the season, is finding those windows where you can feel comfortable that you're not going to give the game away, or if there is a mistake, if there's a pick six, that you can recover from that and have enough time to do so.
This is such a dangerous, this is playing with fire, because what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is that maybe Christian Veilleux goes out with the starters in the second quarter and you're up by 21 points. Now let's throw the quarterback in with the starting offensive line and let him see if he can go score us a touchdown to get that lead.
Yep.
And then he does it. And then you hear, the noise gets so loud. And especially if then, something happens and Clifford has to come back in the game and the offense, for whatever reason, doesn't put up another, this is a very dangerous game we're proposing here. But I do think that I agree. There's value if you can still get points with the quarterback, because Clifford can come right back in. It's not the same thing as an offensive lineman who is then stopped exercising and his body is now kind of cold and he's got the warm-up process. The quarterback can go out, he can diagnose, he can throw.
Yeah. There are so many unwinnable conversations and arguments, right? Of just how to approach this hypothetical situation. And the bottom line, as I have said all offseason, is that to get to any of these points where any of these conversations and hypotheticals matter, Penn State has to build that lead. They never did it last year. They never had that cushion to where you could feel comfortable enough, right? Maybe, if we're going to gripe about one opportunity and one chance where Penn State had a 25-point lead or 21-point lead, whatever it is, and didn't go to the reserves and that cost them the season last year, I don't buy that. But yes, I do think this year they are in a better position to feel more confident to try to take those shots when they can.
So S. Dale 91 asks, T. Frank, who is your biggest FU player? As in, he performs and you say, F you, I told you so. So who I've been right about. Guys that I've been right about.
You wash your mouth out, young man.
Hey, letters of the alphabet are not vulgar. The thought behind them might be, but technically I didn't say anything bad. And this is an editorial choice, Nate. This is but my question. So my problem is in this conversation, Nate, it always has to do with the NFL. It's because I think we all know the Penn State players that are good, right?
Yeah. Everyone
kind of has an idea of those players. But when they go into the larger pool, Chris Godwin comes to mind immediately. I was like, that guy's great. That guy's going to future first round pick. And he went in the third. And I thought everyone was stupid. I was right about that. But, I don't know I don't know. Who do you think I've been the most right about? I have a hard time viewing this one. Who would you say is my best hit when it comes to these things?
Oh, man. Well, I've only been working with you directly for years. So, I think... I think in terms of, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really sure because I don't look I think that we would both probably fall into the category of thinking that Sean Clifford is not the Antichrist, right? And
sure. Yeah.
And so he's the one that immediately jumps out to me as when Sean Clifford has success. In my head, I go, see, obviously he's not horrible. Like, obviously, he is a serviceable college quarterback. I mean, I think that that's been self-evident for a long time, even though he has had some costly mistakes and done some costly things that have prevented Penn State from winning in some cases. But no, I mean, look, like, does Joey Porter make? I'm not really sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. I think the thing over the last probably 18 months I've enjoyed the most haven't been players, but things, right? So we talk about something on the show. We have this concept. I've watched film. I discuss something with you or with Ryan or with Greg. And then a month later, James Franklin talks about that thing. Or Mike Yurcich brings it up in an interview with you. That's when I go, okay, so I know what I'm talking about. It's those moments, I think, really that make me feel better, not necessarily, I saw Tyler Elsdon in high school, and I know he can play linebacker, and, this fall, I don't think anyone's been like, Tyler Elsdon is bad. They haven't seen him yet,
Yeah, no, I think John Sutherland would fall into that category for you this year, depending on what happens with him as a guy who you have not, I mean, look, it's not like you've blown him up to be more than he is, but I do think you've defended him from, again, kind of the most vicious of criticism that have been.
I want to save everyone from, I want to save them all from falling off the cliff. Just because I'm holding on to them as they're dangling over the edge and people are pushing them, it doesn't, that's where I feel they're going, is this, as you said, is the Antichrist, is a demon. Jonathan Sutherland is the place I'm going to hit all of my frustration about my life, and it's going to come out through football. I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to defend people from, because that's unfair. That is completely unrealistic.
Yeah, I don't like some of the mean-spiritedness that's out there, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
So here's Tin Man. I know the answer here, but is there any chance Penn State can get Keon Keeley to visit? And who, for those of you who don't know, Keon Keeley is a 5-star defensive end who decommitted from Notre Dame. And Tin Man, do you want me to say yes to like bring a little bit of false light into your house, into your life, into the situation? Because he visited Alabama and then he decommitted. So from Notre Dame. So is Penn State on the way to Alabama? Does he have to like take a pit stop here? Because that might be the way to do it. But
now you're being mean. Let him have hope.
Sure. Yes. Penn State. Well, I don't know. You're right. Here I am crushing people's hope. Last question coming from Twitter today is Keandre Lambert-Smith closer to being the number 2 receiver or the number 4 receiver? As in, does he have the potential to be pushed to be the number 2 guy to whoever is the number 1, or is he more likely to be passed by Mega and Wallace? Your thoughts, Nate?
Option number 2.
Okay.
I don't think he's in the ballpark of Washington and Tinsley. Not yet.
Yeah.
Right. I think he's better than he was. I mean, look, I wrote about him earlier this week. He's better than he was. Still needs consistency. It's the same story with a lot of these guys. It's just about developing and taking the strides that where James Franklin talked about it yesterday about Kevon Lee and reaching full potential. And I think that that's where some of the frustration comes for some of these players, is that you see these elements of potential and you say, well, why can't they get there? Why can't they do that all the time? What is preventing that from happening? And I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is in that boat, but so is Malik Mega. So is Trey Wallace. Like those guys are not fully formed products. And in some cases they shouldn't be expected to be, but I mean, I think that there is certainly, from all the conversations that I've had this offseason, like there's a no doubt about it quality of Tinsley and Parker Washington.
Yeah.
And so just given those 2 options of the question specifically, I do think he's closer to 4 than he is to 2.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation. So to what you say about and comparing those 2 players of Lee and Keandre Lambert-Smith, Both of them, they had the curse of playing early because we got to see them, got to see their potential, got to see the opportunity for them to make big plays. But we also got to watch the growing pains. We got to watch them do the things that maybe if Caden Saunders doesn't play this year, he's doing behind the scenes.
Yep.
So there's that curse of expectation. They'd never got the opportunity to be the shiny new object on the shelf. You had to break glass immediately, grab them, and then figure out what they were. So right now, Trey Wallace is that guy. And from an athletic perspective and from a tangible sort of what I've seen from him that makes me go, ooh, there is an opportunity if he accelerates and cuts that learning curve, he could threaten that position. And, you know, obviously the same thing is true with Malik Mega. So those three guys, I think, are in a good cluster. But as you pointed out, the top two are clearly the top two.
Just for the record, I think Keandre is going to have a good year. I don't think it's going to be spectacular, but I think he's going to make some plays. And I think that he's going to be a missing ingredient to Penn State's offense.
All I heard was 10 touchdowns. So we'll leave it
10 touchdowns. Saeed Blacknall. Mark it down. It's right there.
Oh, Nate, thank you so much for doing the show with us today. The BWI Daily Edition mailbag is officially closed. You want to do this again next week?
No.
All right, I'll get Greg. It's fine.
Okay. Sorry.
That'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. Once again, thank you for watching and subscribe on wherever you get your podcasts, rate, review, all that stuff. And of course, make sure you like the video on YouTube and you subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, wherever you get your things, social media, the extranet, Internet 3, whenever it gets out here.
Say nice things. Don't be mean.
All right, that'll do it. We'll talk to you tomorrow.